Hi, everybody. This is Jared Bruning with the Daily Bellringer, and of course, this is Daily Bellringer Now. Of course, this is my little thing I've started doing to share some resources and ideas with history teachers, or really anybody who just loves history in general. Just some little tips and ideas and everything. And today, I have to admit, I'm super excited because I'm kind of, I guess you could say, I'm kind of starstruck because I have to me, a legitimate celebrity with me today, and I realize today's episode of this might be a little bit, I guess, odd because I'm not necessarily addressing a direct historic issue or direct teaching technique. The deal is, over the past few years, as I've been teaching, I've found there's a lot of teachers that are really into Disney World. And actually, I'll point out here real quick, I'm going to turn my camera for just a second. If you look over here, some of the backstage of Bellringer Now, you can see I have my Disney World vintage posters back here in the background. So I, too, am a big Disney World nerd. And I know many teachers who are, kind of more than just simply go to Disney World during the summer. They decorate their classrooms in Disney theme and everything. And so I thought to myself, what if we could talk about how can we tie Disney World into teaching history, into American history, world history, whatever? And so I thought to myself, who is the leading expert in that area? And the person who came to mind immediately was a guy from a podcast that I'm very much into. It's called Walt Disney World Radio. And so I'm going to introduce here a guy that I've been listening to for years. I love his show. He's an author. He's a speaker. He's a podcaster. He does everything. Okay, so I'm just going to allow Lou Mongello, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself here on the show.
Hey, Jared, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and thank you for the kind words. Yeah, I have been talking about Disney World really since about 2004 when I wrote my first Walt Disney World trivia book and started podcasting in 2005. I'm originally a lawyer from New Jersey. Two things I ask that you don't hold against me, who's just loved the park since I went in November of 1971, and now just enjoy sharing the love of the magic of the Disney parks and Marvel and Star Wars, and helping other people do what I did, which is turn what they love into what they do.
Yeah, and honestly, to all of us teachers, I feel like you have that dream job, or you have that dream job that everybody I would want, where you literally have turned going to Disney World into your profession, which is unbelievable. I couldn't imagine that. I'm sure at a point it becomes work, but it is so cool what you're doing and everything. So I'm super excited to have you on here today. But I sent you a few questions here, and some of these questions are pretty big and vague, and I know that you've done podcasts on these. And again, I'm going to include a link to your podcast, of course, down in the description of this video. So if you're interested, definitely check out his podcast, the Walt Disney World Radio. But I guess here's a big question. I know you've done some podcasts about this in the past, but what are some tips, if you're making a trip to Walt Disney World or a Disney park, what are some tips on your vacation to make it both fun, but also educational? You got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, Disney actually makes it very, very easy. And the nice thing as either or both parent and or educator is that you can help your kids learn without them realizing that they're learning, right? It's sort of baked into what Disney creates. Walt was all about sort of edutainment, this idea of helping people learn, understand, and appreciate while they are enjoying something as well. And sometimes it's both subtle and also in your face. Look at some place like Liberty Square, right? One of my favorite lands in Magic Kingdom. It's a treasure trove. I did an audio walking tour of it years ago, and this is not a slight on any of my teachers growing up, but I learned more about American history researching Liberty Square than I remembered as a kid growing up. And I think that's a testament to the details and the storytelling and the way Disney does such a remarkable job of embedding learning opportunities into literally every resort, every park, and everything you experience in the parks.
Yeah, absolutely. And the cool thing I was thinking about is so many times I've had students who have come back after summer break and they've gone to Disney World. And sometimes I'll be talking about something in my class about a historic topic, and I'll be like, hey, remember if you went to the Hall of Presidents, remember when they did this? And it'll be like, and it'll kind of bring it to life to them, like, oh yeah, I remember that part of the show and everything. But I was saying, you were talking about Liberty Square there, and there was something, and again, I can't remember off the top of my head. you were talking about the design of Liberty Square. What is the deal with the like through the middle of the sidewalk? What there isn't there like a kind of a little detail there? And I forget off the top of my head, but I think it's kind of a cool one to look for. And we'll probably come back and talk about some cool individual things. But do you remember what that was through the middle of Liberty Square?
I do, and it's the ultimate dad joke, but it's true, because if you look through Liberty Square, the pavement is red, and there is this very winding, circuitous, really sort of, with almost like sort of unspecified, like, linear borders. There's this trail that runs through the center of Liberty Square that is like embedded small pieces of gravel. And if you want to have fun with anybody that you take to the parks, you look down and say, what does this represent? What is this thing that begins at the one end of Liberty Square in where Fantasyland ends and runs all the way through until it meets Frontierland? And people say all these different things. Oh, this is a trail for horses. I had one guy go, I know exactly what this is, Lou. This represents the journey of an American people forging their way west. I said, that's actually very good, but the real answer is it's a river of poo. Because there were no restrooms, there were no inside bathrooms in colonial America. And as you know, they would literally take their bedpans and their waste and they would throw it out the window, and the streets would be pitched inward. So all of the waste would gather in this sort of river-like, middle. So everything speaks, everything is there for a reason. And it's one of my favorite little, dad joke details in Disney.
Well, I realize this is a side tangent that we didn't really intend on going off on here. But, in my classes, I talk about the fact that, honestly, if you think about the greatest inventions of all time in mankind, the ones that have made the biggest impact on mankind, arguably the toilet is the greatest invention ever. Because think about for how many thousands of years we as human beings were living right next to all of that waste. And how much that has changed, disease and everything in the past, 200 or 300 years since we've really developed a system of getting rid of that. And it's, I hate to be gross, but it's true.
And you know what? There are no toilets in Liberty Square. There are no restrooms in Liberty Square. You literally have to go into Fantasyland or into Frontierland because Disney wanted to be completely historically accurate.
I never thought about that before. I never considered that fact that there are no bathrooms in that area of the park. That's pretty funny. But then, of course, and I'm sorry, we're getting off on Liberty Square here and everything there in Magic Kingdom. But as you go from Liberty Square and kind of lead on down towards Frontierland, I mean, you can kind of look at the change in architecture and the changing buildings as you go that way. And, for me, you can kind of almost tie in a Manifest Destiny or Oregon Trail lesson with your kids as you're walking that way, because you can just kind of see how things are changing as you go down there. But yeah, you bring up a great point. I mean, Disney does a great job of having edutainment. I mean, yes, that's what they're all about, that you're learning as you're also being entertained. But and I suppose this next question is really just going to kind of keep on leading us down this rabbit hole of different things that you can look for in the park. But besides some of the obvious attractions, because obviously when people think of going to Disney and learning, they're like, well, there's Hall of Presidents I can go to. I could go to American Adventure at Epcot. But what are some other places, like, are some of the big highlights that you would say these are things you need to check out if you're like really into history, or if you want to take your kids over and point something out? What are some other things you might say might be some of your big highlights?
There's almost every attraction has some sort of embedded learning opportunity in it. So, for example, moving over to Epcot, where really the focus, especially when it opened, was about learning. There was actually a teacher's resource center that only educators could access at one point, that had this treasure trove of free resources that teachers could take back to their classrooms. But even starting at the very beginning, Spaceship Earth, while it seems to be this sort of fun, kitschy, very well-designed tour, it really is the history of communication of just us as humans. And it takes us through from the very earliest cave drawings to where we are today and the so very rapidly approaching tomorrow. You mentioned things like Hall of Presidents, Liberty Square. I think Frontierland sometimes almost gets forgotten because it is tying in a story, and it actually begins in Fantasyland. Because if you go from Fantasyland towards Liberty Square, there's actually this covered archway, and it really represents the journey of going from the old world and sort of medieval times, not the restaurant, but going from medieval times, crossing the Atlantic and landing in Northeast America. And that's why the first thing that you see is a harbor house, because it's where people would go and it's where you'd go to get food and rations and supplies. And it is sort of this journey through time and literally as America grows west. So you start off in that Hudson River Valley of New York, you work your way through sort of federal Philadelphia. You start to see the progression of time as you approach frontierland, you cross the Mississippi, and you sort of continue to build your way out west. It's incredible, and you can almost spend an entire day, and I've seen so many educators bring kids down to use places like that as educational opportunities. Main Street USA, it is not just this Walt's, utopian vision of what small town America was like, but to a certain degree, it is, and it too tells a story in that transition as you move forward through Main Street. You are really moving forward through time as well. Certainly every country in World Showcase has a wonderful historical educational opportunity. I mean, literally the list goes on and on and on, because you can find it throughout, like I said, really every park and even through a lot of the resorts.
Yeah, and honestly, I talked about with you before we even started this, there's no way we're going to cover even the tip of the iceberg of all the stuff that you can learn there. But one thing that you brought up there that I think is really interesting that a lot of people, completely ignore is the transition from different areas of the parks and in all the parks when you're going from place to place. And honestly, as a teacher, and I know maybe I'm getting kind of abstract here, but as a teacher, one of our big issues in a classroom is transitioning. Like, how do you move from having the kids reading this to moving to doing this activity? And honestly, I've spent years, because I'm such a Disney fan. I've spent a lot of time, kind of studying some of like Imagineering and things they've designed and things like that. And so I think you can almost, beyond just simply seeing the specific historic things they have there, you can kind of learn a little bit about education about teaching just by kind of studying some of their methods and how they do things. And so, when you're at the park, definitely pay attention to those transitions. I like, too, that you brought up with Spaceship Earth. Of course, Spaceship Earth is the, history of communications. But honestly, I've taught world history in the past, and if you ride that ride, it really takes you through an entire year of world history in that one little 7 or 8 minute ride. Because you start with hunter gatherers, they move into the ancient Greeks, Romans, everything as you're going along the way, and then brings it right up to today. So it's just a cool ride if you can if you have a student that goes this summer, or if you're going yourself, try to say, hey, go ride Spaceship Earth and see what you think after we've talked about everything in world history this year. So that's definitely a big spot you could check out. Now you brought up, and again, this was something I had no idea about. I never heard of this before. You said that they actually had a teacher resource center at one time over at Epcot.
Yeah, when Epcot first opened in 1982, located not far from Spaceship Earth. And it was, as a kid, it was like that holy grail of places that I wanted to go. But they had a store and an art gallery on the first floor, and there was a set of stairs that had stanchions and rope in front of it. And it was the Educational Resource Center. And up on the second floor, they had cast members there, and any educator could go up and they would give you pages and pages and binders full of educational resources about ways that you could take lessons from Disney, specifically from Epcot, and bring them into your classroom. So they would talk about how the land would use all of these different, very sort of forward-thinking techniques to grow and cultivate food that they ended up using in their restaurants. They would talk about universe of energy and all that. It was fascinating. And there was a section called Communicore, which became Innoventions, which is now unfortunately no longer there.
Yeah.
Communicore was tied into each of the pavilions and had hands-on learning opportunities there. So I love that it really was this extension of what Walt wanted to do. Look, even when Walt built Disneyland, the original concept for Main Street was going to have this Edison Street off to the side, which really was going to be this walking tour through American history. It ends up sort of evolving and becoming Liberty Square here and Hall of Presidents. But it did sort of begin with Walt. It continued through Epcot, and really now has continued to grow and flourish and expand even more.
Yeah, and that's a great point too. You were just bringing up that there's so much science and math and things like that you can learn, like, especially at Epcot. I mean, there's biology you can learn at Animal Kingdom. Hollywood Studios, I'm still trying to figure out what you can learn there. I guess you can learn to go to a galaxy far, far away, I guess. But
Sunset Boulevard. I mean, look, Hollywood and Sunset Boulevard really is a journey through Southern California from like the 20s to the 40s, and there are lessons to be learned there, whether it is architectural, music, some of the sort of pop culture and historical references there too. More entertainment based, but it is sort of a snapshot from the golden age of Hollywood.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a cool park to go to. I love going there and walking down that street. Of course, everybody's rushing to get to Galaxy's Edge, but right. And that's the other thing I've heard you say so many times that is something that I've kind of learned to do over the years of visiting the parks is, if you're looking for these historic things, really all you need to do is slow down a little bit. And it's tough to do that when you're only there for like a few days and you spent the money to be there. But yeah, if you can, I've gotten to the point myself that's like when I go to the parks, it's not necessarily about the rides anymore. It's just simply walking around and just seeing the stuff. And, I'll always find something new when I'm there and everything. But I had another question here, and I know this is another one of those big ones that I don't really know if we can really capture in the time that we have here. But, what about Walt Disney himself? I know you're very much like a historian of Walt Disney himself. I guess, can you speak to kind of his love of history and kind of, how all of that kind of manifested itself in the parks? And maybe, what can we learn from Walt Disney? What can students learn just by studying Walt Disney?
Yeah, so Walt did love history, both domestic and global, and he was very patriotic. There's multiple quotes from Walt Disney about his level of patriotism, and if you can see inside the whites of my eyes, the American flag is waving, and up and down my spine is red, white, and blue. He wanted to make sure he brought that into Disneyland, into his films. If you go back to even Disney during the war effort, so much of what Disney contributed to help the war effort, and he using his animators to create films to sort of help the effort as well. Again, I went back to Main Street USA too, and sort of because Walt literally did live the American dream, right? He came from nothing. He came from the heart of the American Midwest. And you want to talk about sort of the entrepreneurial journey and story, like Walt lived it. I mean, he went to California he bought a one-way ticket, and he came with $40 in his pocket, the clothes on his back, and a small suitcase, and, sort of burning his boats, not giving himself an opportunity to fail. His story is incredibly inspiring in terms of living out that American dream.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you want to see what America is really supposed to be all about, somebody pulling themselves up out of, because he grew up basically in poverty and then found a way he had an idea and was willing to do what it took to make that idea into a reality. And it's just amazing what all he accomplished. And so, even if you're not just teaching like a history class, I'm thinking if you're teaching a careers class or economics, studying Walt Disney gives you kind of an idea of, what this whole system or what America is really all about, how we all have these opportunities to make whatever we want out of everything. So I love Walt Disney. I love, looking at the history and everything that he built and everything he did. So yeah, he's definitely a great person to study and everything. So I guess, just one last question here. Are there any other like little individual tidbits, like one, we talked about, the Pooh River through Liberty Square. Is there one other, the one that pops into your mind, like, here's like somewhere over by this attraction hidden back in a corner or something like that you're like, this is something you need to look for or check out? You got any of those like in mind that you might want to share?
Oh gosh, like there's so many. It's like when you're overwhelmed with an abundance of ones to choose from. I'm trying to think of one that might be a little bit more obscure that you might say. All right, so I'll share one of my favorites. And you'll never find this on any guidebook or any map or anywhere else. But if you enter Main Street USA, and you pass the hub, on the left-hand side is there's the fire station, and there's the horse barn. And every so often, the horse barn doors will be open. And if you go look in there, it literally looks like a snapshot from the turn of the century barn and authentic vintage, what do you call them, like the bridles for the horses. But if you look off in the corner, there's a single bulb hanging from an exposed wire. And in the interest of Disney being as authentic as possible, that bulb is handmade by somebody, I believe, in Pennsylvania or Virginia, using only the materials and techniques that were available to create the first incandescent light bulb at the turn of the century, because that needs to be present there in terms of the telling of the story and the moving forward in time. Before you go from the gas lamps to the electric lamps, you need to have that bulb there. Nobody ever sees it, but it's one of those little details that I think speaks volumes.
Yeah, and that's the cool thing about Disney. There's so many of those things that are just like you said, nobody will ever see it, but they try to make it, they want to make it as authentic as possible. So they go to the effort of doing that. And there, along like Main Street, I mean, it aren't like many of the fixtures, like the horse posts, things like that. I mean, those are actually like authentic. I mean, they've collected those and, and actually have stuff that is actually from that time period. It's not recreated in some shop or anything like that. It's actually the real deal. Some of those things that you see when you're walking down the street. So I mean, there's all kinds of cool stuff to see there at Disney. I mean, I guess one more question here. I kind of said that would be the last question, but one more quick question. Going back to that whole resource thing for teachers, do you have any idea now? Is there somewhere you can contact now to get like resources or anything like that, or you can check out? Do you know of anything like that?
Yeah, so Disney has always wanted to help both educators as well as students. And for years, they had something called the Youth Education Series, where you could bring students down, take them on tours. That has since recently transitioned into something called Disney Imagination Campus. And I believe it's DisneyCampus.com, where there are events you can attend to. There are special events. There are curriculums. It helps teachers plan trips. And there's also an amazing number of resources by teachers for teachers, not just on the site. I think that's teachers pay teachers, but there are, I actually know of someone who's a friend of mine who is an educator who is putting on a conference. I think it's called like the Happy Teacher Conference in Orlando. She's at inspirededucation.info. I have no horse in the race, but I like seeing good people doing good things. But I love the idea that there are teachers who are Disney fans who want to help learn and share and help other people sort of bring Disney into their classroom as well.
Yeah. Like I said, there's so much to see there, so much to do. And with so many people going there during the summer, it kind of is a good way to tie in, especially when the kids are coming back from summer break. And when you find out they went to Disney, it kind of is a good way to get them to open up a little bit and start thinking about what they saw and everything while they were there. So again, I didn't want to keep you for a long time here today. I'm just excited that I got to chat with you real shortly about some of these topics. So again, thank you so much for your time here, Lou. Thank you for what you do with your podcast and for all the resources you share. I guess, do you have any closing comments you wanted to make or anything before I sign off here?
No, I love what you do. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity. And if I could help you or anybody else, if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to me directly. You can find everything I do at WDWradio.com, and I'm at Lou Mongello on social.
And the thing is, too, with Lou, he actually responds personally to all these emails, because I'm sure you probably get tons of emails. And I was, honestly, when I sent you an email to ask if you'd want to come talk with me a little bit, I was like, there's maybe like about a 3% chance I'll get a response. And sure enough, I got a response. And I was like, wow, awesome. What a great guy. So again, thank you so much for joining me here today. You had some good tips there. And again, if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to email Lou. Maybe he can try to help you out, or email me at the Daily Bellringer at gmail.com. And I can try to help you out as well. But again, thanks for joining me here today, Lou, and we will talk to you later. All right, thanks.